SABC has again called on Chris Hani's killer to come clean if he hopes to be released on parole. The Pretoria High Court today heard an application seeking to secure parole for Janusz Walus. Walus has been behind bars for 23 years for slaying Hani. The North Gauteng High Court heard that the state is opposing Walus's application because he has not followed correct channels. The Justice Department says Walus was just weeks away from a fair parole hearing, but Walus instead chose to petition the High Court in a bid to secure his freedom after over 2 decades behind bars. Now the High Court has postponed his application until Thursday. The South African Communist Party has again raised concerns about the judge's handling of that matter.
We're hoping for the judge to keep him in jail, to accept the minister's appeal, because we think that there are good legal grounds that were argued, brilliant arguments. But we must indicate that we're perturbed by a sense of hostility towards the respondents. And I think that it's an issue that perhaps she could refrain a bit, be cordial, engage according to the law. And I think that what is at the core here is the fact that this is an unrepentant murderer who seeks to be released through subverting the law itself. And of course, because he has resources, it's able to exhaust them to this kind of level.
Look, of importance to us is finding comfort in counsel articulating meticulously the substantive ground upon which we are applying for leave to appeal, which we have also indicated earlier that even on Thursday, whichever way the ruling goes, if there's an application for the earlier order to be executed, that being Mr. Walus placed on parole with conditions, we will oppose that as well, because it would defeat the very purpose of the same application, which is why we welcome the judge's decision not to hear that application today.
For more on today's court case, we are now joined by our political reporter, Dumalo Mohlalo. Dumalo, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Alicia.
Look, Dumalo, I think everybody's confused. Do tell us more about today's proceedings, and I think clarify for us when the lawyers for the Justice Minister said they infringed the doctrine of separation of powers in their previous judgment.
Yes, well, basically what this speaks to is the fact that there is already a process underway which is guided by the processes of the Justice Department, which means that Janusz Walus, after having spent over 20 years behind bars, would have had an opportunity to petition the Justice Department vis-a-vis the minister and put his case forward as to why he feels he should be eligible for parole. Things like good behavior, things like remorse, things like having, looked at his life and feels that he can be make a positive contribution to society. Now, these are all precepts that any prisoner, whether it's political or not, has to undergo when his time behind bars comes up for parole. Now, what Walus's legal team has done essentially is that they have now undermined that process and tried to go through the back door, which is what is now irking the Department of Justice to say, but why are you now going through this process when already there was a process underway? I think what Walus's legal team are afraid of, if you look at the rhetoric that has been, bandied about in the lead up to this particular process and these court appearances, is the fact that he does understand that as far as the SACP goes and as far as the late Chris Hani's widow and family, Medim Hani and the family are concerned, he should not receive bail. They feel that he has not shown any remorse. And one of the key issues why they feel he has not shown remorse is that he has not laid bare the truth as to who else was behind sanctioning or calling the hit on the late SACP leader, which is what the SACP says. How can you be remorseful when you don't come through with the truth? And he has not even given an opportunity or taken an opportunity to approach the family and try and show that he is indeed sorry and he has changed and tell them the truth.
Look, Dumalo, let's expand on that. I mean, a lot of people are confused, and this came about in the hearing today, that this was a death sentence that was commuted to life, doesn't it then mean that he's supposed to remain for the rest of his life in jail?
Yeah, that is very true. And this is where the technicalities of the law come into play, because once South Africa then moved into the democratic dispensation and the death penalty was then, banned.
Revoked, yes.
Then it created a bit of a conundrum, because new laws came into play, which then stipulated exactly what it means for one to be behind bars for life. Life imprisonment does not necessarily mean you're going to die behind bars, provided you follow certain or meet certain requirements. And one of those requirements is, good behavior, showing an indication that you are being rehabilitated and applying and coming before the parole board and pleading your case.
Under the new constitution,
Under the new constitution, that is. So now that South Africa is under the dispensation of the new constitution, this is what needs to be applied. Whereas before, you would have taken it for granted that Janusz Walus would have either spent the rest of his life behind bars, or under the old laws, he probably would have hung.
Look, let's talk about this, Dumalo. What is the parole board's stance on the matter as to why they granted parole in the first place?
Well, the parole board's stance on the matter is that in terms of what the law stipulates, he has met the conditions in terms of good behavior. When it comes to the basic black and white nitty-gritty of it, Janusz Walus has not necessarily transgressed any of their requirements. He's, in fact, met them. But the point is, it's one of those cases that is not just your run-of-the-mill case. You can't put a Janusz Walus case with your regular run-of-the-mill street thug who's been terrorizing community. And not to say that, there's a difference between people, but at the time when he committed this, horrendous crime, the country was at a knife edge. And his plot with those behind the scenes, which the SACP has been saying there's more to the story than the guy who's taken the fall, was to destabilize the country and derail the democratic process which we are now under.
Look, very quickly, I know we're running out of time, Dumailo. Now, judgment has been reserved for Thursday. What are we going to hear on Thursday? Are we going to hear that Janusz Walus is going out or is staying in jail? Well,
that depends on what the judge decides after hearing and finalizing all the arguments. But the state has said that, it's too early to preempt. The SACP has raised its concerns about the tone of the judge, so forth, not being too happy about how she comes across. But there is still another step for the state to follow. If this matter goes against the state, they can then petition the Supreme Court of Appeals. And, the state is saying we're willing to take it all the way should our processes not prove successful. Hopefully it doesn't have to go as far as that. But should the Supreme Court of Appeal also fail, then of course they want to take it to the highest court in the land. All
right. Well, thank you for that update. Dumalo Motlauli live with us here in studio on the Janusz Walus parole hearing update.